You know what's about to happen that nobody's talking about enough? Freddy Peralta is going to end up on the Dodgers, and when it happens, it's going to perfectly illustrate why baseball's competitive structure is fundamentally broken. And I'm not being hyperbolic here. I'm not exaggerating for clicks. This is a real scenario that's quietly developing, and it's going to expose everything wrong with how this league operates. Freddy Peralta is one of the most underrated pitchers in baseball, and that's not an opinion. That's a statistical fact. The guy is 28 years old. He's locked up through 2026 with team options beyond that, and he's been consistently excellent for the Brewers. We're talking about a pitcher who strikes out more than a batter per inning, who has elite spin rates on his fastball and curveball, who has been a cornerstone of Milwaukee's rotation for years. And now multiple teams are circling, and you better believe the Dodgers are right there in the mix. Here's what makes this situation so infuriating if you care about competitive balance. The Brewers are a small market team that does everything right. They draft well, they develop talent, they make smart trades, they punch above their weight year after year. Milwaukee has made the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years, despite having one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. That's organizational excellence. That's doing more with less. That's the kind of team that should be rewarded by the structure of the league. Instead, they're about to get picked apart by teams with deeper pockets. The Brewers are in an impossible position with Peralta, and everyone knows it. He's making around $6 million this year, with options that take him through 2028, but here's the catch. Those later options are club options that escalate in price, and Milwaukee has to decide whether they can actually afford to keep him through his prime years or whether they cash out now while his value is at its peak. That's not a baseball decision, that's a financial decision. And the fact that small market teams have to make financial decisions about players in their prime is exactly the problem. The Dodgers don't have to make those kinds of decisions. They can afford Peralta's contract. They can afford to exercise those options. They can afford to keep him around even if he gets injured or regresses because they have the depth and the payroll flexibility to absorb it. Milwaukee doesn't have that luxury. One bad contract, one player who doesn't pan out, and their entire competitive window could close. So they're forced to consider trading a pitcher who's been excellent for them, who fits their team perfectly, who represents exactly the kind of player you build around if you're trying to compete. Let's talk about what Freddy Peralta actually brings to the table, because this isn't some speculation about potential. This is proven production. Over the last 3 seasons, Peralta has averaged over 200 strikeouts per year. His curveball is one of the nastiest breaking balls in baseball. His fastball plays up because of how well it pairs with that curve. He's durable, he's consistent, and he's entering what should be the prime years of his career. This is exactly the type of pitcher contending teams dream about acquiring. And here's where it gets really ugly. The Dodgers are one of multiple teams interested in Peralta, which means there's going to be a bidding war. But here's the thing about bidding wars when the Dodgers are involved. They don't just have money, they have organizational depth that lets them outbid everyone without actually paying more. They can include prospects that other teams can't match. They can take on additional salary that other teams won't touch. They can structure deals in ways that give the selling team what they think they want while still coming out ahead in terms of actual value. Milwaukee is going to get a haul for Peralta if they trade him. They're going to get prospects, maybe a major league ready player, possibly some financial flexibility, and sports media is going to praise the Brewers for getting good value, for being smart, for maximizing their return. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. No collection of prospects is worth more than a proven ace in his prime when you're trying to win championships. Prospects are lottery tickets. Peralta is a sure thing, but the Brewers can't afford the sure thing, so they trade it for lottery tickets and hope they get lucky. This is the cycle that defines modern baseball for mid-market teams. You develop talent, you watch it flourish, and right when that talent is ready to help you compete for championships, you have to trade it away because you can't afford to pay market rate or build around it properly. Meanwhile, teams like the Dodgers swoop in, acquire that talent, plug it into their already stacked roster, and compete for titles while the team that developed the player starts rebuilding for the next cycle. What makes the Peralta situation even more frustrating is the timing. The Brewers have been competitive, they've made the playoffs, they've developed a winning culture, they've done everything you're supposed to do as an organization, and their reward for all that success is potentially having to trade away one of their best pitchers because they can't afford to keep him long term. That's not a meritocracy. That's not competitive balance. That's a system that punishes teams for being small market no matter how well they operate. When Peralta ends up in Dodger blue, and I'm saying when because the writing is on the wall here, think about what that means for the competitive landscape of baseball. The Dodgers already have one of the best rotations in baseball. They've got Ohtani coming back from injury eventually. They've got depth. They've got options. Adding Peralta doesn't fill a need. It creates an embarrassment of riches. It turns a strength into an overwhelming advantage. It's the baseball equivalent of the rich getting richer while everyone else fights for scraps. The Brewers, meanwhile, will be told to be excited about the prospects they get back. Sports analysts will break down the trade, talk about how Milwaukee got good value, discuss the timeline for when those prospects might contribute. But here's the reality. Those prospects might never pan out. They might bust. They might develop into solid players 3 years from now when Milwaukee's current competitive window has closed. And even if everything goes right, even if those prospects all become productive major leaguers, they probably won't be as good as Freddy Peralta is right now. This is what market inefficiency really looks like in baseball. It's not some clever analytical edge that smart teams exploit. It's financial advantages that compound over time. The Dodgers can pursue Peralta because they can afford to pursue everyone. They can make aggressive offers because they have the resources to take risks. They can absorb failures because their margin for error is enormous. Milwaukee can't operate like that. They have to be perfect with every decision because one mistake could set them back years. And before someone jumps in with the whole small market teams need to spend more argument, let's be real. The Brewers spend what they can afford. They've invested in their team, their facilities, their player development. They're not cheap. They're just not billionaires playing with monopoly money. There's a fundamental difference between a team that won't spend and a team that can't spend at Dodgers levels. Milwaukee is in the latter category, and the league's economic structure punishes them for it. What really exposes the hypocrisy of the current system is how this trade will be covered when it happens. The Dodgers will be praised for their aggressive approach, their willingness to go all in, their organizational excellence. The Brewers will be praised for getting good value, for being smart, for setting themselves up for future success. But nobody will talk about the fundamental unfairness of a system where one team can afford to add to a championship roster while another team has to trade away key pieces of a competitive team because they can't afford to keep them. Freddy Peralta represents everything that's great about baseball player development and everything that's broken about baseball economics. He's a homegrown star who climbed through Milwaukee's system, developed into an elite pitcher, and became a fan favorite. He's exactly the kind of player that should stay with the team that developed him, that should be there for his entire prime, that should be part of the franchise's identity. Instead, he's about to become trade bait because the economic realities of baseball don't allow small market teams to keep their stars. The Dodgers aren't villains for pursuing Peralta. They're doing what every smart organization would do if they had the resources. But that's exactly the point. The fact that only a handful of teams have those resources, the fact that market size matters more than organizational competence, the fact that financial flexibility creates competitive advantages that can't be overcome through smart management alone, that's the problem. And Peralta's impending trade is going to be another perfect example of that problem in action. When this trade goes down, watch the reaction from Brewers fans. Watch how a fan base that's watched their team compete year after year has to process losing another star player. Watch how they're told to trust the process, to believe in the prospects, to have faith that the organization knows what it's doing. And then watch as those same fans see Peralta thriving in L.A., helping the Dodgers win another championship, being part of another dynasty while Milwaukee starts another rebuild. This is modern baseball. This is competitive imbalance in its purest form. It's not about cheating or breaking rules. It's about a system that allows certain teams to operate with advantages that others can never match. Freddy Peralta to the Dodgers is inevitable because the economic structure of the league makes it inevitable. And until something fundamental changes about how baseball distributes resources and creates competitive balance, we're going to keep seeing these same stories play out over and over again. Get ready for it because it's coming, and there's nothing Milwaukee or any other mid-market team can do to stop it.